Talk to us about the evolution of tech. What should people know about the cycles, the patterns?
So there certainly are, as an academic, we're interested in kind of what are those patterns, right? We're not interested as much in kind of the one-off, this happened in this industry versus that. We want to know, well, what are the commonalities and what are the differences? We certainly do tend to see patterns and ways in which the technology and industries kind of emerge and evolve. This sense that they start off relatively slowly, relatively smoothly, but without growing relatively fast, and then there's this inflection point and they will kind of blossom in some way, or they'll never have the inflection point and they'll never really take off. And then eventually they'll kind of flatten off and mature in some way. And so this creates this kind of S-curve, right, where it's kind of flat and slow, it accelerates, and then it kind of flattens off at the end here. And the interesting thing is, whether it be in slow-moving industries or fast-moving industries, this is a pattern that repeats most of the time. Maybe not all the time, but most of the time. And so recognizing that even in industries where you feel like the growth is never going to end, it usually does at some point, even in spaces where you feel like you're churning and you're not really getting anywhere, maybe you just haven't found the right kind of specific path, the right dominant design to kind of spur this kind of growth and adoption by the broader set of organizations out there. And there are ways in which this regularity really creates important key success factors for organizations over time, right? So early on in these industries, what we typically see is lots of different new products, lots of product innovation. And so organizations that are successful early on are really good at innovating. They're creating new products. They're creating lots of new things. They're trying them out. They're flexible. They're adaptive. They kind of move between different things. They're good about building coalitions and ecosystems and standards and trying to find ways to push towards the dominant design. The firms that do really well in the middle, typically speaking, are the ones that manage growth the best, because this is where we're seeing this massive wave of adoption coming in, and the firms that can grow with them and attract the biggest group of adopters are the ones that stand to gain the most by being able to be successful. So a lot of times there it's about building scale, making these huge investments, recognizing it's time to kind of make that push, doing it, and getting yourself out there to the mass market and to the biggest consumer or customer base that you can possibly get out there. And then as we see industries mature, it really becomes about figuring out, what's next to some extent, or maybe even as they're still growing, you're thinking about what's next. But even if you're going to stay within the industry, there's a lot of firms that can be very successful in mature industries. Those typically are the cost leaders. Those are the firms who focus on process improvements and process innovation, not product innovation, who can cut out the cost and have the scale to be the leaders to be successful in that space. And so kind of understanding the basic pattern that exists in most industries, that most industries will kind of follow, and even more importantly, kind of what drives the success at different stages, gives managers kind of a sense of what do we need to be focusing our resources on? What do we need to focus our attention, our investment on in order to be successful? And what kind of industries should we be looking for, given that we're good at certain things? Maybe you're really good at product innovation and not so good at process innovation and cost cutting. You better find a way to keep moving from industry to industry, kind of in those early growth stages, and then moving on to the next thing. This has kind of been IBM's perspective on how, or Apple's perspective on how to think about these different industries. As they become more commoditized, as they become more mature, it's probably too late, but you're certainly already very much thinking about what's that next big thing that we're going to invest in, because that's what we're good at. And other firms can say, we don't need to be the early adopter or the early leader in this space. We'll wait till we see it taken off, but we're so good at process innovation, we're so good at cutting costs that we can kind of jump in and play with anything at that point in time. We'll buy somebody, we'll make some investments, we'll hire some people, and we'll figure it out at that point. And they're very successful doing it.